Hello again. Now, there's been a stalemate at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Parties don't seem to agree on a number of crucial issues. Today is meant to be the last day to seal the deal. But at this stage, it seems that the past 2 weeks of negotiations were not so fruitful. Our senior reporter, Siphamandla Goge, is in Egypt, joining us now to give us more insight on what's going on there. Good afternoon, Ngome. Any updates? I mean, this is the last day of this summit, the COP27 Summit in Egypt. Any update at all? Any movement regarding the negotiations?
They are moving at a very slow pace. There is nothing major to report on, to be honest, except to say that negotiations are underway. Parties are negotiating. They do not agree on a number of issues. Look at it this way. You have about 197 parties. All of them come here with different political, economic, environmental interests. And now they come here to negotiate on a number of issues and things, and they will never, ever find common ground in all of the things that they are negotiating on. Now, the trick here is to have a compromise. What are the issues they are not agreeing on? Number one is the issue of loss and damage that is being pushed hard by the emerging economies, including developing nations in Africa. They want a fund which will be able to take care of all the loss and damages that has been caused by the impact of climate change. The developed nations are saying, we hear you, let's talk about it, but for now we don't think will be able to contribute financially to what you want. So it's the structure and the mechanism of this fund that the developing nations are asking for. It boils down to one thing: who is going to pay for what is being discussed and what they will eventually agree on, how much is going to be paid, over what period, what are the terms and conditions. Simply put, no one wants to take blame and responsibility or accountability here. That's why you have a stalemate which centers around issues of loss and damage, climate finance, adaptation and mitigation. Earlier on, there was a media briefing by the COP presidency, basically updating the media that talks are ongoing. The likelihood is that you may have you may have an outcome by Monday, the latest. It will not be for the first time that a COP drags on beyond the stipulated time frame and deadline. If my memory serves me well, out of all the 27 editions that have been convened before, only 2 were able to conclude on Friday. Others have had to go on till Saturday or Sunday. But let's take a listen to what the COP presidency had to say about the ongoing negotiations.
It was, of course, coming out of Glasgow, a reason for a lot of frustration for many countries who are on the front lines of the climate emergency. So we were aware of that. Anyone following would have been aware. So we allocated a lot of the resources and time and effort between Glasgow. It didn't start here, but of course intensified with the appointment a few months before COP of Jennifer Morgan and Maisa Rojas from Chile and Germany to shepherd the process, and they did that to the best of their ability. It is not an easy issue. It is quite complicated, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the complexities surrounding that issue. They did their best, and then now we step in. We've taken the most recent text, which has 3 options at least on paper to see what we can do with it, and that's, again, part of the conversation Minister Shukri will be having, perhaps started and will continue to have. We have high hopes.
And Siphamandla, what is the view of Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, about the slow pace of negotiations?
He's frustrated, and there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. He can only hope and pray that there will be a breakthrough, there will be an outcome here. But other than that, he can only motivate, appeal to parties to say, please negotiate in good faith. Please find common ground and have some consensus. The world is waiting. You've been negotiating for 2 weeks. There is no outcome. Put aside your interests and your egos. Just work for the greater common good here. So yesterday he held a media briefing where basically he had to put more pressure, quote unquote, on all the parties that are negotiating to say, please just try and come up with a deal. Let's take a listen.
There has been clearly in the past times a breakdown in trust
between North and South, and between developed and emerging economies. But this is no time for finger-pointing. The blame game is a recipe for mutually assured destruction. I'm here to appeal to all parties to rise to this moment and to the greatest challenge that humanity is facing. The world is watching, and there's a simple message to all of us: stand and deliver. Deliver the kind of meaningful climate action that people and planet so desperately need. Global emissions are at their highest level in history and rising. Climate impacts are decimating economies and societies and growing. And we know what we need to do, and we have the tools and the resources to get it done. And so I appeal to the parties to act in three critical areas. First, the most effective way to rebuild trust is by finding an ambitious and credible agreement on loss and damage and financial support to developing countries. The time for talking on loss and damage finance is over. We need action. No one can deny the scale of loss and damage we see around the globe. The world is burning and drowning before our eyes. I urge all parties to show that they see it and get it. Send a clear signal that the voices of those on the front lines of the crisis are finally being heard. Reflect the urgency, scale, and enormity of the challenge faced by so many developing countries. We cannot continue to deny climate justice to those who have contributed least to the climate crisis and are getting hurt the most. Now is a moment for solidarity. Second, I appeal to all parties to forcefully address the huge emissions gap. The 1.5 target is not simply about keeping a goal alive, it's about keeping people alive. I see the will to keep to the 1.5 goal, but we must ensure that commitment is evident in the COP27 outcome.
And Siphamandla, I understand South Africa's ambassador to Egypt, Mr. Nsiki Mashimbie, is in hot water for his statement at COP27. What did he say?
Before I answer that, allow me to briefly tell you that if these talks fail, the likelihood is that they will have to defer all those points that they do not agree on to the next Conference of Parties, the 28th edition, which will be convened or held in the United Arab Emirates next year, because it's common that talks will stall, they will break down, and there will be a breakthrough. But the trick is to have a meaningful outcome, which many people doubt that will be produced here at COP27. South Africa's ambassador to Egypt is in hot water simply because when he was delivering opening remarks during the launch of South Africa's pavilion or the stand at COP27, he made a comment that many people consider to be undiplomatic. He was joking when he said, well, he was deployed as an ambassador, or the criteria that the president used to appoint ambassadors has got to do with people who would have failed in their respective careers, and they get deployed as ambassadors or appointed as ambassadors, and their only job basically is to eat and drink on behalf of the nation, and that did not sit well with too many people, including DERCO. Let's take a listen to the statement that he basically made, that he has since apologized for, but it's been too late for his apology.
I don't know if you know how the president appoints ambassadors. If you don't, I'm going to tell you. There are a number of things that I am, and there are a few things that I'm not. I suspect that when you are the following things, you get appointed as ambassador. One, if you are a failed businessman. That's one of the things I was in the past. When I failed as a businessman, I moved on to the public service. And I guess I failed at that as well. When you're a failed businessman, a failed civil servant, I think you become an ambassador. Because I think being an ambassador is much easier. All you have to do is eat and drink on behalf of the nation. I'm sure all of you could do that. Having said that, I don't think you want me to proceed to say anything.
Wow, Siphamandla, that was supposed to be a joke? I mean, I don't know if you've seen his apology. I haven't, and very briefly, it sounds like he needs a little bit of training, so to speak, or to be guided properly. That didn't come across as a joke.
I saw his apology. He blames the media for it, but of course, that's what politicians and diplomats do. He is in hot water. Derko has said he needs to go for a refresher course to learn more about what to do, what to say, what not to do, what not to say. He is in hot water. He has apologized. He immediately apologized because many people who were in the South African stand, they were really shocked by that statement. He uttered it as a joke, but it backfired.